Hello and welcome to session 2 of the module on exploratory data analysis. In this part 1, we are going to talk about implausible values, outliers, and influential observations. We will begin the session with a quick overview of what we studied previously. We will look at the concepts of implausible values, outliers, and influential observations in your data. We will understand techniques to identify them using numerical measures and graphs. We will study implications of such observations on statistical analysis tools that are available to us. And in part 2, we will look at how to incorporate them in statistical analysis plans for our main study. In the previous session, we looked at the two main pillars that are essential to understanding the nature of our outcome variable so that we can begin to explore them in terms of their distribution and also in terms of the statistical analysis techniques that are available to us. The first pillar is the data type or level of measurement. The second pillar is the distribution of variable values. We understood that knowing the scale of measurement of our dependent variable is key to understanding how we can explore it, whether we can use bar graphs or in terms of summary measures, it would be better to use the mean and the standard deviation or the modal value or the median to represent them. In trying to understand the distribution, which is how frequently relative to whole unique values or range of values of the variable occur in the dataset, we understood that there may be different kind of distribution shapes that may arise. Some of them could be fairly symmetrical, which means that the left-hand side of the distribution is similar to the right-hand side when the distribution is split across the center. Other distributions may be more stretched either to the left or the right-hand side, resulting in a phenomena called skewness. If the distribution shifts more towards the left, it's called a negative skew, and if it shifts more to the right, it is called positive skew. We touched upon that some of the reasons why this may happen to a distribution is because either the nature of the variable is such that it tends to be skewed, and the other reason was because of the presence of unusual observations. A negative skew distribution would have unusually low values, and a positive skew distribution is likely to occur because of the presence of unusually high values. We also looked at an example in which the age of the baby during the hospital survey was our primary outcome of interest. We looked at the histogram of this outcome variable and we summarized the distribution using summary measures such as the mean, standard deviation, the quartiles. And we were able to assess that the skewness may be because of some unusually high observation leading to positive skewness or right skew distribution. It is these unusual observations that are the topic of discussion today. With small data sets, it is very easy to identify unusual observations. By a cursory glance of the data set, of the dependent variable that we are interested in, or even maybe an independent variable that we are looking at closely, we might be able to eyeball unusual observations. In larger data set, we have to look at other kinds of techniques. However, once we identify unusual observations or maybe a single observations, we have to look at it closely and determine whether that is an observation we keep or for analysis or keep aside from the main analysis. Keeping it within the dataset and analyzing it by including it has different implications, and excluding it also has other different implications. The first type of unusual values that we will look at are implausible values. Implausible values are values that by definition or biologically are highly unlikely to occur. They can be pre-specified during the exploratory data analysis once identified or prior to writing the statistical analysis plan. For example, in a hypertension study, we may specify that if we observe a systolic blood pressure value of greater than equal to 250 or less than equal to 80, we might consider them as implausible to occur in our target population of interest. We may want to specify this criteria in advance when we are writing our statistical analysis plan. Implausible values may also be identified as error values that may occur during the data collection process. For example, look at this visual. On the left hand side, you have a blood pressure diary that records blood pressure measurements in triplicate for an individual. It's a pen and paper record. So the first value is 73, the second value is 74, and the third value is again 73. However, it may so happen that during electronic data capture, the person who may not have the technical expertise to interpret these values and is merely recording the values may record them as 24 or 23 based on their understanding of the pen and paper record handwriting. And hence, the picture that you see on the right has the record as 73, 24 and 23. Now, 24 and 23, when looked at by a clinician, may appear as highly implausible values for diastolic blood pressure. So they appear as unusual observations when you plot the histogram of diastolic blood pressure. The more general unusual observations are called outliers. Outliers are values within a variable or variables that vary greatly from the others. They are either much larger or significantly smaller. They may arise as part of the natural distribution of the variable or as a result of measurement or execution errors. Values not generated by the same methods as others in the data are also turn out as outliers. The presence of outliers has implications on the summary measures that we use and also other statistical analysis that we perform. The figure on the left shows summary measures for an outcome variable calculated with and without the presence of outliers. With outliers, we see that the mean is 20.08, and without outliers, the mean reduces considerably to 12.72. You can see the change that this causes in the standard deviation. The standard deviation reduces from 24.79 to 4.61, which is almost a 6 times reduction. This has implications on the power of the study. The more the variability, the lower is the power. If you calculated the power of your study based on a lower standard deviation, this might have implications on the power of the study to detect the effect that you want to. On the right hand side, we see a regression analysis. In this, to understand the relationship between the outcome and the independent variable, a regression line has been fitted. We see that there are some unusual observations towards the extreme right of the graph. Because of the presence of these observations, the actual best fit line, which is the red line, may actually be in error. Once these outliers are removed and a line fitted, the black line may be perhaps a more true reflection of the relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. Hence, in this case, we see that the slope of the line changes because of the presence of the outliers. Sometimes a single point or very few points may result in points being outliers, and other times a collection of observations may be outliers based on multivariables. An outlier based on a single variable and a single value is called a global outlier, whereas our observations that are termed as outliers based on multiple variables are called multivariable outliers. Now, there are several methods to detect outliers, and during the exploratory data analysis technique, sometimes we have to use multiple of these methods. No single method can be termed as the perfect method. The use of these methods appropriately arises from years of experience or handling multiple data sets. If your data set is small, one of the first methods that you would explore in order to identify outliers would be sorting or summarizing. Sorting would be a visual method where you either arrange your data in ascending or descending order. In this example, we have a set of observations arranged in ascending order, and we can see that the value towards the end is unusually high. It is an outlier. The variable is height in meters. On the right, you have the summary measures, and the summary measures you will see also have the mean, the standard deviation, the quartiles, and the minimum and the maximum value. The maximum value itself helps you identify that there is an unusually high observation. Look at what that unusually high observation may be affecting. It tends to pull the mean towards a slightly higher side as compared to the median. If the dataset had been slightly larger, then the box plot is a good graphic to understand the presence of outliers. On the left hand side, we see the box plot and a point marked in a red circle lying way outside the box plot. The central line in the box plot represents the median. So on the right hand side, you have the median value as 1.7, which may be a true reflection of most of the values present in the dataset. The values in the box plot also help you to establish fences for this particular variable during your exploratory data analysis. Fencing is a technique used to identify boundary values. They can also be help you to establish the implausible values for a particular variable. The anatomy of a box plot is shown here. The central yellow line is the median value. The ends of the boxes represents the lower and the upper quartile. The left whisker extends from the lower quartile to 1.5 times the interquartile range on the left hand side of the x-axis, and the right hand side extends to 1.5 times the interquartile range. The statistical technique helps us identify the outliers as points that lie beyond these whiskers. This definition is statistical, and the clinician may use their clinical judgment to also identify whether these are actual clinically unusual observations or not. For larger data sets, other techniques that we can use to explore outliers are histogram and the quantile-quantile plots. The plot on the left is a quantile-quantile plot where on the y-axis you plot the quantiles of your data and the x-axis has the quantiles of the distribution you want to compare your data to. This is especially useful when we are trying to detect departure from normality, which is one of the key assumptions for several parametric statistical tests. The blue points are deviating significantly away from the black line, which represents the quantiles of the normal distribution, indicating that there is a considerable departure from symmetry from normality, and this is an asymmetric distribution. The graph on the right, which is the histogram, also shows positive skewness because of the presence of a very large value. This is also demonstrated in the numerical measures of skewness. The skewness value being greater than 3 indicates significant departure from symmetry. Another technique that is used to detect departure from normality and also explore outliers is the z-score. In this, each value in your raw data set is subtracted from the mean and divided by the standard deviation of the variable. This leads to the conversion of each raw score into a z-score. If the z-score lies outside the range of -3 to 3, it is considered as an outlier. Not all outliers that we identify may need to be removed from the dataset. Outliers that substantially change the result of the calculations that we do, or outliers whose deletion from the dataset would substantially change the results of our statistical calculations, are called influential observations. Generally, the identification of influential observations are done during the main statistical analysis. That is, after we have explored the presence of outliers, identified them during the exploratory data analysis stage. In this main statistical analysis stage, when we are using techniques like regression analyses, and we identify that removing certain outliers substantially changes the estimates and confidence intervals or the significance of the result, it is then that we consider them as influential observations. In those situations, we use metrics such as the Cook's distance and the Mahalanobis distance to identify influential observations. Some outliers can also be identified as leverage points. Leverage points are points or outliers with substantially different predictions than the usual predictions given by the model. The identification of influential observations and leverage points is preferably done during the mean statistical analysis. We will be discussing more about outliers in the live session.